Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Danila. My guest today is Savannah Wheeler. Savannah is the Senior Vice President of Finance with Avanti Residential. Welcome to the show, Savannah.
Thanks, Adrian. Glad to be here.
Savannah, for our audience, would you please tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. I started in real estate when I was just 18 or 19 years old. I got my real estate license and worked for a small brokerage while I was in college. And I really enjoyed the idea of real estate and, working in that field. So I actually at my college took every real estate class that was available. And I petitioned them to have one more course because then I could consider it a minor, but they didn't want to do that. So I tried every year that I was there to get them to do that, but they didn't. So I just took the classes that were available. And then when I graduated, I had an internship with a commercial firm that also did property management. And that was my first property management introduction. And then when I moved back home, I got into banking, and I had this idea that because I had a degree in finance, I had to get into investment banking, right? And so that was the expectation. And so I went into talk to people and do interviews, but being that I lived in the East Coast, it was really competitive to the people who went to, Harvard or NYU or all of these big schools that were getting into investment banking. So me and my husband, not at the time, but we moved to San Francisco to kind of have a new fresh start and have more available jobs and start something new. And I still had it in my mind that I was going to get into investment banking. So I was, taking courses, getting certificates, trying to network with people. And my cousin, who worked at a real estate firm in the San Francisco area, was like, hey, why don't you do some temp work for us while you're looking for a job? And he gave me a job. I was doing some, underwriting and some market analysis and stuff like that. And he hooked me up with a friend of his that was an investment banker. And the investment banker was like, I don't know why you would want to get into investment banking. That's not fun. What you're doing now in this real estate thing you've got going on, you should stick with that. That's the smart decision. Work hard, work your way up, and make it work over there. And so then in the market crashed. And so I ended up being a full-time employee there because I was working hard and not being paid a lot, and they needed people like that to help get through the downturn. And so I just stuck with it. And so I moved. I worked on the investment side for a while for multifamily. And then I moved to Denver to start a property management company for them and to help them build that from the ground up, and have been in property management now, for the last almost 9 years in property management specifically. And then obviously previous to that was more on the investment side. But in total, I guess I've been just working in real estate. It just kind of called me, even when I tried to push it away, and I thought the expectation of me as a finance major was to be an investment banker. It sucked me right in. So now I'm lucky to be with Avanti and working to help them. This still a new company and growing to build up their property management accounting department.
Savannah, many people are looking at individuals like you, very successful in executive positions, and they wonder, how can I get there? What would be a few pieces of advice that you would like to share with with all of us how to get there? What are very few things? I mean, what are some things, not a very few, some things that you would you would advise someone that is shooting through the top. They really desire to make the best out of their careers and maybe eventually land a vice president, an executive job.
I think that humility is a big thing. I think having humility and having allows you to know that there's always something to learn, to wake up every day and know, like, I don't know everything, is a huge component of growing yourself and your career and making a presence for yourself in the company that you're at, and being noticed by asking questions and trying to understand what it is that you don't know, instead of trying to. A lot of people think that if they project that they know everything, that they could grow and that people will have respect for them. But I think it's the opposite. I think having humility and being able to know that you don't know everything and absorbing everything around you to learn as much as you can will ultimately help you have more knowledge and be more confident in yourself. And I also think that thinking like an owner, if you show up to work every day thinking like this is like your business, this is what you do, and feeling that pride for the company and what you do, and truly thinking like an owner and thinking like, how does what I do impact the owners of this company and the success of the company as a whole, instead of just trying to perform in your individual role in what you're doing. Really understanding what your role is in the company and how it impacts the success, and showing up every day with that in mind, with the success of the company as a whole and the success of the whole team, your team that you work with directly, but also people that you don't work with directly, and trying to understand how the business works outside of your individual contribution, I think really helps with your mindset of understanding, as an executive, that's kind of the job, right? Your job is not just one specific function in the company. Your job is to understand how the whole company works and how the strategy, how to drive that strategy in the company. And it's a very strategic role. So, getting your mindset into that strategy and that global thinking of how the whole company works, and really, showing up to learn every single day, learn something new about the company and our who we serve, and that's our residents, but also our investors and our employees, and all of that. I think that mindset is really critical for being able to get noticed and to grow in the company.
One of the things that you said really caught my attention more than anything else was learn the entire business, not just what strictly your job is. And one of the, if not the best piece of advice that I ever gotten was from a blog many years ago, probably like 16, 17 years ago. I was either a groundskeeper or a punch make ready technician, and there was some advice for people on the maintenance field, and the advice sounded like this: understand and speak the language of business. So that stuck with me my entire career, because I realized I'm not going to be able to relate my message to management if I don't speak a certain type of language, their language, right? So they could understand, right? Finance people, they're number people. You have to be able to quantify. You have to be able to not just say, raise your hand and say, we need this. You have to explain why you need, and how does that fit into the company's goals. And that brings me to my next question. And my next question is, well, I'm going to start by saying, we as an industry, we're not really doing a phenomenal job at training service managers and service personnel into the financial side of the business, right? So we're just kind of promoting from within. The hardest working technician gets promoted to a service manager, but then they're handed a 60, 70, $100 million asset to manage with no formal training to say, this is the training for service manager, right? And that includes budgeting and many other things that need to be understood. To be a manager, it's completely different than just being a technician. So with that being said, Savannah, what are a few things that you wish service managers would know in the roles, or that they could be taught, we could teach them in order to become very successful?
I think that, to your point, the budgeting and the actuals and the actual financials is important. There's whole sections in our profit and loss statements that are dedicated to maintenance activities like unit turns and the turnover costs. And, from the investment side and the investment strategy, people are always talking about, oh, the turnover cost, and so that's a huge impact that the maintenance team has on the financials. And, ultimately the profit and loss statement is the financial success of the property. And that means in order to increase the profitability of the property and the financial performance, we need to increase our revenue and decrease our expenses. And the office team is very aware of how they can increase our revenue. The front office teams are constantly, they know their leasing, their renewals, their rent increases. They know how to drive revenue at the property. They know how occupancy works and all of that. But the maintenance team has the biggest impact on reducing our expenses, but they don't understand when they, any like of the efficiencies. Like if you do bulk ordering, for instance, and have, these 8 units are going to turn in this month, right? It's a heavy turn month and you're going to have to turn those over. So what are the most common items that you're turning, and how do we bulk order those so that we can reduce the costs of each individual item that we're ordering, or how do we know, like, what is the budget that we're aiming for every month to do these turns and that sort of thing. So I think knowing the budget and knowing the financials and knowing how they impact that and how they can contribute to the performance of the property does a few things. One, it helps them to understand the why they're doing what they're doing, and about more about the business, right? And speak that business language. But it also, I think, helps them get in line with the office team. The office team is driving for financial performance, and often the maintenance team are just kind of doers, like, here's your maintenance order, here's this, do that. But if they can actually work as a team collaboratively towards the financial performance and understand how they're contributing to that, it helps bring them together on the same, playing field, and understand, office teams driving revenue and we're reducing expenses and we're working as a team to increase the value of this property. And I think in addition to that day-to-day financial, I really think what's lacking, sometimes on both the office end and the maintenance end, is understanding the strategy, the investment strategy of that property. When we buy a property and the acquisitions team is underwriting that property and creating a pro forma, which is projecting the financial performance of the property over the term that they want to own that property. It's usually like 5 to 10 years, right? And they're doing that based on a specific strategy. So they walk the property multiple times. They do a due diligence. They take a lot of time to understand that asset prior to buying it and developing a strategy. But I don't think that strategy always gets communicated to the teams that are working on the site so that it can be executed on a day-to-day level. And I think if there was more education and empowerment to the teams to understand that strategy and understand when we bought this property, this is what we wanted to do with it. This is how we want to, it was performing. A lot of times we're not buying, sometimes we buy development deals from the ground up, and sometimes they're brand new deals that just stabilized or they're leasing up. But a lot of times we're buying stable assets. So they were performing. And when we buy it, we're buying it because we think we can perform better. Right? We think we can increase the value of that property. And we can only do that with really great rock star employees at the site, right? And we believe that our employees at the site are rock stars and they can do it, but they could do even better job at that if we taught them what this strategy was, what they're aiming for, to get this property where it needs to be.
You're making some very, very important points. And the points are along the lines of, in order for us to know if we're doing well or not, we have to understand like what the goals are. We can't just say, hey, we're gonna work hard, things are gonna happen. We have, to set up some certain KPIs. And sometimes, they're financial goals. KPIs that we gotta make. We gotta make this much income. We have to spend this amount of money because there's mortgage to be paid and utilities and so on and so forth. And that piece that you just mentioned, communicating to the teams properly what the goals are for the asset, right? Is it a short, medium, or long-term hold? Puts them into a mindset of understanding better what the goals are, so they could be part of. How could you do a great job if you don't even know what you're part of? Like you might have an idea, you might guess that you'll do the best every day, but then just having those numbers and having those goals being clearly related to the individual site team members, I think it'll be very, very helpful for everybody, for them, because they have the understanding, so they know what to shoot for, and also for management and for asset management to, hey, we're all part of this project. So in order for this to be successful, all the parts have to be involved, have to have skin in the game, and also have to have a good understanding of what's going on, what the plan is with the asset, and how do we get there.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Savannah, next I wanted to ask you about your readings. I'm a reader. I won't say that I'm a very avid reader, but I try to read. I try to make time. I make a point in disciplining myself into reading. So I wanted to see if you could share a few books, fiction, nonfiction, that really, really help you along the way. Your favorite books.
Well, I have young children, so most of my reading are children's books. My kids love when we read to them, so the Harry Potter, the Narnia series, or all of that is what I mostly read nowadays. But when I do get time to read for myself, I really love to read leadership books. I have on my list to read, and I've started to read it online a little bit on my phone, but like I said, I don't always get the time that to myself to read with 4 kids. But is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and I really I've watched a lot of his podcasts and about the topic, and I really strongly relate to The Infinite Game and have read some of it, and I'm looking forward to continuing to read that book in my spare time and finishing it, because I think that right now that's really resonating with me, of understanding the flexible mindset and understanding that the work that we do outlives us, and what we're working towards might not be something that we ever even accomplish individually, that it's about the longer term game. And I think that I get really inspired, even as a young child. I would read Chicken Soup for the Soul was, my favorite when I was a teenager. Like, I would read those books cover to cover all day long. And I think it's because I really love the more nonfiction stories and inspiration things. And as an adult, it's more, leadership books um, and leadership content online. And I think the infinite game to me is kind of a concept that I've always believed in, but actually reading about it with with stories and with, concepts that can be derivative from that theory and that overall mindset is really helpful for me to concrete that. And so right now that's kind of my thing. And I mean, as far as fiction books go, like I said, most of them are fantasy stories for my kids, and I love them and I love sharing that with them. But for myself, I really love leadership books. I think leadership is a skill that is underestimated. I think, at Avanti, one of our core values is everyone is a leader, and that really is important to me. And I think that leadership is something that you can display whether you have people directly working for you or not. You can show up every day and be a leader and lead by example, and know that you have an impact in what you do and other people's lives around you, and that your impact, back to the book I'm reading, but your impact can outlive your time there, so whether it's your time on this earth or your time just in your job and what you're doing, what you do, if you show up every day and you think long term, and you're thinking out to the future, what you do today can impact the people who take your job over if you get a promotion or if you leave for another company. What you put in place can outlive your time, and I think that's a really great concept because it promotes a mindset that's collaborative and team forward, and knowing that you're having an impact is not just about you and growing your career and growing yourself and making a name for you, but it's about having a long-term goal that doesn't only involve you, that involves many different people all coming together and maybe not ever having met, but are expanding on the process that you put in place at your job when you were there.
I love how you say that your work outlives you. And this is an amazing point. I'm thinking, what are we striving for as human beings? Well, I think one of the things we're striving for, what we're really thinking about, whether it's like conscientious or not, is legacy, right? How do we want to be perceived when we're not going to be around, whether it's a job or whether, when we're past out of this life? And there are very few ways that, we're going to be known for. One of them is going to be our children, if we have children, because, we pass on to them whatever we can. So we're going to be remembered a certain way by our children, our family. And another very important way is our career, our jobs, and the people we impact. And you also said everybody is a leader. In my personal opinion, I am passionate about leadership, but I think that I don't really speak the common language of people that preach leadership or talk about leadership. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is influence. So you're not a leader just because you have a title, whatever management title or executive title that might be. everybody and anybody could be a leader. That you're making a great point. I'm glad that a company like yours has that as part of their, I guess, core values, to say you don't have to have a title in order to take ownership, in order to make things happen, in order to have a voice, in order to influence. Because at the end of the day, it's about influencing others, right? Leadership is really not about that title that you have, that you carry around with you.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a fantastic point right there. Now, people typically look at successful individuals and they're saying, well, they got here, now they have the title, they have, they have the money, they have whatever, they have the perks of the job. They're superstars, and I think they're just looking at it and think that, things happen overnight, right? What I don't really see so much, and what the society doesn't bring up too much, is the failures we're going through in order to get where we are today. So I wanted to see if you could share from your personal experience, a failure or an apparent failure at the time, right, perceived as such, that help you, get better and set you up for a future success.
Awesome. Well, first I'll address the failure topic. I feel like I feel strongly that, and I tell my kids and I tell anyone who's ever worked for me, that mistakes and hiccups and roadblocks and failures are a part of life, and they are an extremely important part of life. They are the building blocks of anyone, anyone's success or future, or becoming human, becoming an adult, becoming a contributing member of society. It depends on having those mistakes and failures. And every, when I tell my kids, I'm like, I don't care if you are not perfect. I don't expect you to be perfect. I want you to make mistakes, but the only thing I ask is that you learn from them, because that's what they're there for. That's why they happen. And so I've, obviously had many failures in my career and in my life, as anyone should. And I think it was difficult for me to think about this question and to pinpoint specifics, because I do embrace failure and look for opportunities to learn and to be better every day. But I do think that, at my last job, we had a lot of technology and we had a lot of projects that we were rolling out, and we failed a lot. Me and my team, I oversaw the technology team. We had to implement all of these projects, and time again, we were re-implementing them, and the teams were not receiving them, and we weren't getting adoption, and people were not happy with them. And it was failure after failure after failure. And we kind of were like, what's happening here? And so we all got together as a group, and we developed this what we called an advisory committee, with representation from all of the different departments, to come together and evaluate, like, we're just moving too fast. We were trying to get these out the door. We weren't communicating properly amongst the different teams. We weren't testing it properly. There wasn't an executive sponsor. So there wasn't sponsorship for these projects at the top level that believed in it and were helping the teams with change management. And so we just evaluated some of the, the big ones, right? The ones that were a disaster, right? The big projects that we had to abandon or re-implement, or we were spending a lot of money to try and get these things right, and we weren't. And so we all came together, we built this committee, and we met regularly, more frequently up front, but then over time it went to monthly as we were getting things more smooth. But it created it broke down some silos that we had as a company between the departments, and it increased the communication and the sponsorship of those of the rollouts that we did. We slowed things down. We took our time. We had a better process of really understanding the priority of projects that we're rolling out and the pain points that our teams were having, that we're solving, and communicating between the departments to understand, like, just because, you know, operations is having a pain point and they need to solve that pain point and they roll it out, but then accounting is now having a pain point because they rolled out this new platform that is seriously impacting them, and so we were able to communicate together and come together and accept the fact, like, okay, what happened, it's in the past. Let's figure out why it didn't work. How can we make it better and increase the success rate moving forward of these rollouts by, addressing some of these holes we have in the process. So I think, like I said, there's been, many examples of mistakes or failure in the past that I have and that I could probably talk all day about. But the most important thing is that we address them. We don't hide them. We don't say, like, brush them under the rug or pretend we're perfect. Circling back to my very first comment of showing up with humility and understanding that you don't know everything and seeking to know what you don't know. And that's the same with mistakes, seeking out to take responsibility for those mistakes and figure out, how does this not happen again? What can we do to prevent this from happening again in the future? Will ultimately reduce the amount of mistakes that you have, right? That's experience. And so just facing them head on and understanding. And I think the advisory committee was a great example of a, collective failure and a collective success by addressing that failure and figuring out, how do we make this better? How can we stop this from happening again?
I love the fact that you're saying, we're not looking in the past and try to, dwell on what happened and why did it happen. And, we're looking at it, hey, okay, we're gonna get together, we're gonna figure out a solution. So focus on the solution, not what happened in the past. I think that's a real big deal. It's a really big deal. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Savannah, a lot of the young people are ready to enter the workforce. A lot of them are entering workforce. We were at that point in our life and our career one time. What would be a piece of advice or a few pieces of advice that you would have for the younger generation that's ready to join us into the workforce?
My oldest son, he's 19. He's a freshman in college, and he is all of a sudden taking an interest in me and my husband's work and what we do in our career and asking us similar questions. And I can relate to where he is in life, where he feels like he has to pigeonhole himself. Like, he has to identify exactly what he's going to do for the rest of his life, right? And he's in this mindset of, like, I have to do this. I have to major in this. I have to do this after college. This is my career path. And, how do I get there? How do I, like, I've determined the target, and now I have to determine the path to that target. And as I, spoke about at the beginning of our conversation about how I was in the same mindset of, I was going to be an investment banker and nothing was going to stop me from doing that. That was my target. How do I get there? And I was very, very driven to get there. But life sometimes has different plans for you, and if you are so focused on the target that you've as a society, I think we put that pressure on our young people to need to know exactly what they're going to do. And I'm not the same person I was when I was 19 and I got my real estate license, and people evolve and situations change and you meet new people, and every person you meet, every you know conversation that you have, new opportunities arise, and life is more liquid than that. It's not, you miss out on opportunities if you're so focused on one target and you don't allow other opportunities or conversations to exist, right? And I would say that, young people who are looking to build their career should keep their eyes open and their ears open and just meet people and network with people and have experiences and see where it takes them. Don't turn down opportunities because it's not in the perceived path towards your defined target. It doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes my husband has a teaching degree and now he owns his own business and is doing a great job with digital marketing and building applications and all of that. And it has nothing to do with his teaching degree, but he opens himself to opportunities every single day. It's one of his superpowers. And I would say that, if young people can take that and just know that life will happen. And if you're driven and you want work hard and you look for opportunities, then you'll be successful. You'll go towards it. But if you turn down things because you're so rigid on a path towards a target, then it, it will be much more difficult to achieve.
You said something earlier on, I'm not the person that I was when I was 19 years old. We're always a different person because we're always evolving. And
Yeah.
I wanted to see if you would share with the audience in the past 3 years, if you could mention a belief or a behavior or a habit that you changed that helped you in your life, in your career, something that really made a difference by changing one of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I honestly think that the pandemic has helped me change my mindset on a lot of things. And I know it was a hard time for a lot of people and for a lot of our economy and our country and the world in general. But I do think that for me and for my family, it has been a great growing opportunity for us because am a very driven, career focused person, and work life balance, I have learned over the last couple of years, does not have to be linear. With the broader acceptance of remote work and digital communication, it's allowed for a different kind of work balance. And so for me, being a working mother and having 4 kids, it's always been a challenge to be career focused and also be a mother to my children. And so I think that the digital communication has and the remote workforce and the wider acceptability of it has really helped me redefine that work-life balance and to have the opportunity to learn from my kids as much as I try to teach them by spending time with them, and hearing them. In the morning, I get up early. I log on at 7:30, sometimes even earlier, and I start my work day. And then when they wake up, I have breakfast with them. We do a little family circle time and we all talk about what our emotions are for the day. And and spend some time getting them, ready for school. And then I hop back on my computer and I get more work done, and they're getting their schoolwork done. I'm getting my work done. And then I take a little break for lunch and I have lunch with them and I ask them about their day and how's their day going and did they get their work done and all of that. And then I hop back on, and usually my kids like to go to the local rec center after school, so they don't get home until like 6:30 or 7. So I'm usually logged on working until 6:30 or 7 until they get home, and I'm cranking it out, doing my work, having phone calls, doing whatever. And then they come home, I log off, we have dinner, and I put them to bed, and I get to spend so much more time with them without sacrificing my desire to work hard and have a career. And I love my job. I want to work. I love working. But I also love my family. And I think over the last few years, have the ability to work remote and to have that has changed my philosophy on what work-life balance is. Sometimes it's kind of defined of like defined work hours, defined home hours, and having enough of each. But the ability to blur those lines and to combine work with life, and realize that some work-life balance means that sometimes life happens during work hours and sometimes work happens during life hours, and it doesn't have to be so defined, has really, I think, helped me just feel more fulfilled and more successful as a person. It's really tough when you like put all of your energy towards work and you feel like you're failing as a mother, or put all of your energy towards being a mother and feel like you're failing at work. Is a tough, tug of war that exists. But being able to overlap that and combine it. And I think that, I just went to the AAMD TechCon yesterday, and there was talk about alternative workforce and on-site, and alternative hours and alternative ways to look at that too. Like there are some jobs that require in person still, and how do we, it's harder to hire for those, right? Because people are making the same realization that I've made and that I'm speaking of a different kind of work-life balance. And I think that achieving, creating ways to achieve that for everyone will ultimately help us be a less anxiety, less stressed, less burnt out society in general.
So, a great conversation we had. Unfortunately, just like all great things, this is about to come to an end.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give you the opportunity to, to wrap it up and maybe touch on some things that we didn't have the opportunity, something you're passionate about, or something you wish we were talking about, we didn't have the opportunity to talk about. Something in closing.
I don't know. I think we had a great conversation. I thank you so much, Adrienne. These questions were very thought-provoking, and I enjoyed the conversation. I love to do it again sometime. I think it was great. I think, the conversation, the questions all kind of led well together. And I think that at the end of the day, times are changing and there is opportunity that exists. And I think the overall message is to, be humble, to learn every single day, show up to learn about not just your job, but the company you work for and how it operates, the property you work for, what's the strategy there, and how do you fit into that, and how can you be a leader every single day, no matter if, like you said, it's not a position, it's a mindset. It's leading by example, being an influence, and trying to find the opportunities that exist when they keeping your eyes open, trying to find those opportunities and learn about things that you don't know.
Savannah, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I would love to have you back here. My list of questions is way longer than what we were able to cover during our 30+ minute conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining me here on a podcast. Everybody, thank you for watching us. I hope to see you back here for a new episode. This is Adrian Danila, your host, and this is Multifamily Chronicles, episode number 16. Have a great day.